My girlfriend said, "If you can't accept this, you can leave." I simply nodded, packed my essentials, and walked out without looking back once. Weeks later, when she showed up, what she saw inside changed everything instantly. "If you can't accept this, you can leave." She said it the way someone reads a grocery list. Flat, casual, like those 7 words hadn't just pulled the floor out from under everything we built. I stood there in the kitchen doorway, still holding the mug I'd just poured coffee into, and I looked at her for a long moment. She didn't look back. She was scrolling through her phone, leaning against the counter, one foot crossed over the other, completely unbothered. And that's when something inside me went very, very quiet. Not the angry kind of quiet. Not the hurt kind either. The kind of quiet that comes when your body already knows the answer before your brain catches up. I set the mug down on the counter slowly. I nodded once, and I walked to the bedroom. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. We'd been together for 3 years. I was 29, she was 27, and we'd been living together in her apartment for the last 14 months. I say her apartment because it was always hers, her name on the lease, her furniture, her rules. I was just the person who paid half the rent and learned to take up as little space as possible. The thing that started all of it was not a dramatic blow-up. It wasn't a screaming match or a thrown plate. It was a text message I wasn't supposed to see. We'd been using each other's phones casually for months, to check maps, to look up restaurants, to set timers when our hands were full. It was never a big deal. Until the Thursday evening when her phone buzzed on the coffee table while she was in the shower, and I glanced over without even meaning to, and saw the name at the top of the notification. A name I didn't recognize. A male name, with a message preview that read, "Last night was something else. Miss you already." I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't read further. I just sat there, staring at that little rectangle of light on the table, and felt something cold and sharp move through my chest. When she came out of the bathroom 20 minutes later, towel around her hair, completely at ease, I was still sitting in the same spot. "You okay?" she asked, barely glancing at me. "Who's Oliver?" I asked. She paused, just for a second. Then she kept walking toward the bedroom and said, "A friend. A friend who misses you after last night." She turned around then. And here's the thing about Qley, she never panicked. In 3 years, I watched her navigate awkward family dinners, career disappointments, and one very uncomfortable situation with an ex showing up at her birthday party, all with the same cool, unreadable expression. She looked at me now with that same expression. "He's a colleague," she said. "We had a work dinner. It was nothing. It didn't read like nothing." "Well, that's how you read it," she said, and turned back around. And that was that. The conversation was over before it began. I want you to understand something about that moment, because it matters later. I didn't yell. I didn't demand to see her phone. I didn't call her a liar or make accusations. I asked a question, she gave an answer, and she walked away. And I let it go, because that's what I did. That's what I'd been doing for the better part of a year. Things had started shifting about 12 months into our cohabitation. It was subtle at first, the way subtle things always are. She started coming home later. Not dramatically late. Just an hour here, 90 minutes there. Always with an explanation. Work ran long. She grabbed drinks with a colleague. Traffic was bad, and she stopped for dinner on the way. The explanations were always reasonable. It was the feeling underneath them that wasn't. Like the explanations were just a little too smooth. Like they'd been prepared in advance. I told myself I was being paranoid. I had a history of anxiety. Nothing clinical, nothing medicated, just a lifelong tendency to overthink and catastrophize. Qley knew this about me, and she'd used it before, gently, lovingly, to redirect my concerns back onto me. "You're spiraling again," she'd say, rubbing my arm. "I know you get like this, but I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." And I'd believe her, because I wanted to believe her. Because 3 years is long enough to build a life around someone, and short enough that you still remember who you were before them, and you're not sure you want to go back. 2 weeks after the Oliver text, things were fine on the surface. We ate dinner together most nights. We watched the shows we'd been watching. We slept in the same bed. But something had shifted beneath the surface, the way ice shifts under snow, invisible until you step on it. I started paying more attention, not in a surveillance kind of way. More like, I started noticing the things I'd been trained not to notice. Like how her phone was always face down now. Like how she'd step outside to take certain calls. Like how she'd started going to the gym at odd hours, late evenings, early Sunday mornings, when she'd never been a gym person before. I mentioned the gym thing once. Casually. You've been going a lot lately, I said. Good for you. Trying to stay consistent, she said, without looking up from her book. Which gym are you going to now? That new one on Meridian Street. A brief pause. Yeah. Nice. I've heard it's good. She turned a page. I let it go. But I remembered. The second conversation happened on a Friday night. She'd come home later than usual, and there was something different in her energy, a brightness she hadn't had when she left that morning. She was glowing, almost, but not the kind of glow that had anything to do with me. I knew the difference. I'd known the difference for a while. I just hadn't been willing to name it. We ate dinner mostly in silence. Not an angry silence. We were past angry. We were at the quieter, sadder kind. The kind where two people sit 3 feet apart and occupy completely separate worlds. After dinner, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the couch with her legs tucked under her, and I sat at the other end, and the television was on, and nobody was watching it. Can I ask you something? I said. Sure, she said, eyes still on the screen. Are we okay? She turned to look at me then. What do you mean? I mean, are we okay? You and me. Are we okay? She studied me for a moment with an expression I couldn't quite read. I think we're fine, she said. You think? I think we're in a comfortable place, she said. Things change when you live with someone. The early excitement fades. That's normal. Is it just the excitement that faded? Her jaw tightened, barely perceptibly. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, I said carefully. I'm asking directly. Because I feel like something is off between us, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know how to fix it if you won't tell me. She sighed. Not a frustrated sigh. More like the sigh of someone who's had this conversation in their head several times already and has been waiting for it to arrive in real life. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, she said. About what? About what I want. About where I'm going. About whether the life I'm building looks like the life I actually want. My chest tightened. And where do I fit in that? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. I don't know, she said. 2 syllables. 4 letters. The most honest thing she'd said to me in months. The conversation that followed lasted 2 hours, and I will not give you every detail because not all of it matters. What matters is the shape of it. What matters is that she talked about needing freedom. About feeling like the relationship had become a routine more than a choice. About how she'd been questioning things for a while and hadn't known how to bring it up. And somewhere in the middle of all that, the name Oliver came up again. Not by me. By her. He's helped me think through some of this, she said. He's been a sounding board. A sounding board, I repeated. Yes. About our relationship. About my life. About what I want. I looked at her steadily. Are you in love with him? She didn't flinch. I care about him. That's not what I asked. I know what you asked. The silence stretched between us. He makes me feel like myself, she said quietly. Like the version of myself I was before I got so settled. I heard the word settled like a physical thing. Like she'd just described me as a piece of furniture she'd grown tired of. So what are you saying? I asked. What exactly are you proposing here? She uncurled her legs and set down her wine glass and turned to face me fully. I'm saying I need space to figure out what I want. I'm saying I don't think I can do that if everything stays exactly the same. Define space. She didn't hesitate. I think you and I should be less rigid about what we are to each other. I stared at her. Less rigid, I said slowly. Yes. You want an open relationship. She didn't confirm it exactly. She described it differently. More space, more freedom, no labels, room to breathe. But when I stripped away the careful language, that's what it was. And that's when I said it. I can't do that. Why not? Because I don't work that way. Maybe you haven't tried. Qley, I'm serious. People grow. You might be surprised. I'm not going to grow into that. So you'd rather end what we have over a boundary that you've never even tested? Over a boundary that I've already thought about long enough to know my answer. She looked at me for a long moment. And then she said it. If you can't accept this, you can leave. Just like that. Calm. Certain. Like she'd said it before. Maybe not to me. But somewhere in her mind, she'd rehearsed it. And I looked at her. And I nodded. And I walked to the bedroom. I did not throw things. I did not slam drawers. I pulled my large duffel bag from the top shelf of the wardrobe, the one I'd brought when I moved in, the one I'd always kept because something in me never fully unpacked, and I started going through what was mine. Clothes. My laptop. The book I was in the middle of. The framed photo from my brother's wedding that I'd kept on my nightstand. My passport. The small cash envelope I kept in my sock drawer for emergencies. My headphones. A few toiletries. I wasn't thinking. Or rather, I was thinking with a part of my brain that had apparently been prepared for this longer than I realized, because every decision came quickly and clearly. This goes. That stays. This is mine. That was hers. Qley appeared in the doorway about 10 minutes in. She watched me for a moment. You're actually leaving, she said. It wasn't a question exactly. More like she was confirming something to herself. Yes, I said. Right now. Yes. I zipped the bag. I picked up my keys. She stepped aside when I walked toward the door. I think she expected me to stop, to turn around, to ask one more question or make one more appeal. I didn't. I walked through the doorway. I walked down the hallway. I walked out of the building. I did not look back once. I want to describe what the air felt like outside. Cool. Late September, so the nights had that clean, slightly sharp quality that comes after summer fully releases its grip. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment with my bag over my shoulder, and I realized I had nowhere to go. I'd moved to this city for Qley's career 3 years ago, before we'd even talked about living together. I'd built a freelance career here, which meant I could work from anywhere. I'd made friends here, loosely, the kind you grab a beer with occasionally but wouldn't call at midnight in an emergency. The closest person I had was my brother, who lived 4 states away. I called him. Hey, he said. He sounded half asleep. It was past 11. Hey, sorry. I'm outside. I need a few minutes. A pause. What happened? I'll explain later. I just needed to hear your voice. Yeah, okay. I'm here. We talked for maybe 20 minutes while I walked aimlessly around the block. I didn't tell him everything that night. Just that things with Qley had ended. Just that I'd left. He didn't push. He just stayed on the line. He said, come stay with me if you need to. I said, I might take you up on that. I ended up booking a room at an extended stay hotel a few blocks away. The kind with a small kitchen and a work desk. The kind designed for people whose lives are temporarily without a floor. It cost more than I wanted to spend. I didn't care. The first week was strange. Not painful exactly. Quiet. Emptier than I expected. I worked during the days. I was a freelance content strategist, so my clients didn't know or care where I was physically located. I ordered food in the evenings. I took long walks at night when the hotel room felt too small. Qley texted once, on the 3rd day. Your mail is piling up here. Let me know when you want to collect it. I read it twice. I typed 3 different responses. I deleted all of them. I left it on read. The hotel had a small gym. I started using it every morning, not because I was particularly motivated, but because it gave me a reason to get up with purpose. 40 minutes of movement before coffee. It turned out to be the most stabilizing thing I could have done. There's something about physically exerting yourself that temporarily silences the noise in your head. The analysis, the replaying, the wondering. For those 40 minutes, my body had one job and my brain had to cooperate. By the end of the first week, I'd started to notice something unexpected. I felt lighter. Not happy. Not healed. But there was something, a tension I hadn't even noticed carrying for months, that was simply gone. Like I'd been clenching a muscle I didn't know was clenched, and I'd finally let it go. On day 10, I found a sublet. A friend of an acquaintance had a 1-bedroom in a quieter part of the city, the kind of neighborhood with independent coffee shops and weekend farmers markets, and people walking dogs at every hour of the day. It was small. It had decent light. It had no furniture beyond a bed frame and a small table with 2 chairs. The landlord showed me the place on a Tuesday morning, and I said I'd take it before we'd finished the walkthrough. You sure? He said. Don't you want to think about it? I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, I said. I'd rather just act. He laughed, handed me the keys. I want to tell you about the next 3 weeks because they matter more than you might expect. Not because of any dramatic developments. Because of the absence of drama. Because of the way life starts to reveal itself when you stop bending yourself around someone else's shape. I bought furniture slowly, piece by piece. Not out of budget constraints, though money was tighter. More because I found I actually enjoyed the process of choosing things deliberately. A couch that I liked, and only I liked. A reading chair that nobody would ever call impractical. I put the framed photo from my brother's wedding on the windowsill. I bought a decent coffee maker and a cast iron pan. I started cooking properly for the first time in years. Qley had always been the cook between us, and I'd let that skill atrophy without noticing. My brother called me every few days. He didn't ask much. He told me about his kids, his work, his new car, the minor dramas of his neighborhood. He gave me a window into a life that was very different from mine, but very recognizably human. It helped. I had dinner one evening with a colleague I'd been loosely connected with for a year, a guy named Ben, who also worked remotely, and lived a few streets over. We'd been meaning to grab food for months in the casual way that busy people perpetually defer. He was good company, straightforward, a little sardonic, genuinely funny. We ended up talking for 3 hours at a Thai place down the street. He'd been through a bad breakup the year before. He didn't tell me this to bond over shared misery. He told me it because I asked him something honest, and he gave me an honest answer. It gets clearer, he said. Not better exactly, just clearer. Like fog lifting. You start to see the actual shape of things. I thought about that a lot over the following days. The actual shape of things. I thought about what the actual shape of my relationship with Qley had been. Not the shape I'd wanted it to be. Not the shape I'd convinced myself it was. The actual shape. And I started to see something I hadn't let myself fully see before. Here is the deeper truth about what had been happening for the better part of a year before I left. It wasn't just the distance. It wasn't just the late nights and the face-down phone and the colleague named Oliver who made her feel like herself. It was that I'd been erasing myself slowly, in small daily increments, in a way that I'd told myself was compromise, but was actually something else entirely. I'd stopped talking about my own ambitions because she found them less interesting than hers. Not cruelly. She wasn't a cruel person. Just uninterested. I'd learned to bring up my work successes in a particular way, briefly, quietly, as an afterthought, because when I shared them with the same enthusiasm I actually felt, I sensed a subtle withdrawal in her, a slight flattening of energy, as if my good news was somehow inconvenient. I'd started shaping my weekends around her preferences. Not because my preferences had disappeared, because the path of least resistance was to fold mine away. There were things I'd wanted to do in this city, a woodworking class I'd read about once and save the link for, a hiking club that went out on Sundays, a night course in film history at the local community college, and I'd never done any of them. Because there was always a reason not to. Her plans, her timing, her needs. And I don't blame her for any of that, not really. I blame myself for going along, for mistaking accommodation for love, for confusing the absence of conflict with the presence of peace. I signed up for the woodworking class on a Monday night in early October. It was held in a large shared workshop on the east side of the city, run by a compact, intense man named Garrett who talked about joinery the way some people talk about religion. There were 8 of us in the beginner session. A retired teacher, 2 graduate students, a woman who'd just moved to the city for a new job, a pair of brothers who came together and bickered cheerfully the entire time. Me. I was terrible at it initially. I measured wrong. I cut imprecisely. I made a series of beginner errors that Garrett corrected with patient exasperation. But there was something about the smell of fresh-cut wood and the weight of a hand plane and the particular satisfaction of a joint fitting together cleanly that pulled something awake in me. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not excitement exactly. Presence. The feeling of being fully inside the moment instead of watching it from a slight distance. I went every Monday. I started going to the open studio hours on Saturdays too. I was building a small shelf. Nothing impressive, nothing complicated, but it was mine. Every decision about it was mine. Every mistake and correction was mine. I also started hiking on Sundays. The group I'd found online met at a trailhead about 40 minutes outside the city. They did different trails each week, some short and easy, some long and punishing. I showed up the first time knowing no one, with a day pack I'd bought specifically for the occasion and boots that weren't quite broken in yet. By the end of the trail, I had blisters on both heels and had talked to more people in 4 hours than I had in the preceding 2 weeks. There was a woman in the group, Sophie, who was a veterinarian, relentlessly positive, and had the kind of laugh that made strangers turn around and smile. We weren't romantic. I wasn't ready for anything remotely close to that. But she became a friend. Real, no-agenda friendship. The kind where you can spend 6 hours walking through woods and then eat greasy food at a roadside place afterward and talk about everything and nothing. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that. How much, in the years with Qley, my friendships had quietly thinned because we did everything together and together left less room for separate lives. It was about 4 weeks after I left that Qley called. Not a text, an actual call. I was sitting in my reading chair with a book and a glass of wine when my phone lit up with her name. I looked at it for 4 rings. I answered on the 5th. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Silence. "How are you?" she asked. "Fine," I said. "You?" "I've been." She paused. "I've been thinking." "Okay." "I didn't think you'd actually leave." I didn't say anything. "I mean, I know I said what I said," she continued, "and I meant it. But I guess I thought you'd stay and we'd work through it. I didn't think you'd just walk out like that. You told me to, I said. I know I did. I just, Qley. She stopped. What do you want? I asked. It wasn't harsh. It was a genuine question. I want to talk, she said. I want to see you. I want to understand where your head is at. My head is fine. You don't sound fine. I am, actually. She was quiet again. I've been talking to Oliver less, she said. Since you left. It felt wrong. Once you were actually gone, it felt different. I absorbed that. I'm not saying that to get you back, she added quickly. I'm just telling you where I'm at. Okay, I said. Can I come by? Can I see where you're living? I thought about it. Not yet, I said. When? I don't know. She exhaled. Are you angry at me? No, I said honestly. You should be. Maybe. But I'm not. Then what are you? I looked around my small apartment. The bare walls still mostly unfilled. The shelf I was building leaning against the corner still unfinished. The reading chair I'd bought because I wanted it and no other reason. I'm okay, I said. I think I'm actually okay. She didn't respond immediately. That's good, she said finally, and she sounded like she meant it and found it slightly unbearable at the same time. We said goodbye. I sat in my chair for a long time after, not thinking about her exactly, more thinking about the version of me that would have answered that call differently. The version who would have said, come over right now. Who would have treated her call as rescue rather than just a call. That version felt very far away. The shelf was finished on a Saturday in mid-October. Garrett inspected it. He ran his thumb along the joints and checked the level and was silent for a long moment. Not bad, he said. Coming from Garrett, this was roughly equivalent to a standing ovation. I carried it home on the subway, which was a small logistical absurdity that made me laugh at myself. I mounted it on the wall above my desk. I put a few books on it. The framed photo from my brother's wedding. A small succulent I'd bought at the farmer's market because I'd decided I was the kind of person who keeps plants alive now. I stood back and looked at it for a while. It was just a shelf, rough in places, slightly imperfect in the alignment. But I had made it with my hands, and it was holding things, and it was mine. I took a photo and sent it to my brother. He called immediately. You made that, he said. Yeah. Like, actually made it? With tools. With tools. What's happening to you? He said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. I have no idea, I said, but I think I like it. It was 5 weeks after I left when Qley showed up. Not called first. Not texted. She found my address. I'd left it with her for mail forwarding, so she had it, and she appeared at my door on a Sunday afternoon. I heard the knock and wasn't expecting anyone. I was in the middle of assembling a second-hand bookshelf I'd picked up that morning, a different one from the one I'd built. This one just practical flat-pack furniture, because I'd run out of wall space. I was in old jeans and a paint-stained sweatshirt. There was sawdust somewhere on me from the workshop the day before. I opened the door. Qley stood there in a long coat, her hair pulled back, holding a small paper bag that I assumed had food in it, the way she always used to bring food as a peace offering. She looked at me. I looked at her, and then her eyes moved past me into the apartment. I watched her take it in. The bookshelf in progress on the floor. The tools spread on a drop cloth nearby. The finished shelf on the wall above the desk with the books and the photo and the little plant. The reading chair by the window with the book splayed open face down. The cast iron pan sitting on the stove, still out from this morning's eggs. The hiking boots drying by the door. The 2 coffee cups on the counter, one mine, one from when Ben had come by earlier in the week. The small calendar on the fridge with Sunday circled in red because of the hiking group. The woodworking class schedule pinned next to it. The list of films I was working through for the night course I'd finally enrolled in, tacked above the desk. She took all of it in without saying a word. Then she looked back at me. You look different, she said. It's been 5 weeks, I said. No, I mean, she stopped. She was searching for the word. You look like yourself. I didn't respond to that. She held up the bag. I brought soup. From that place you always liked. That was kind of you, I said. Do you want to come in? She came in. She sat at my small table while I set aside the half-assembled bookshelf and washed my hands. We ate the soup she'd brought, and I made coffee, and we sat across from each other in a way that felt simultaneously familiar and entirely foreign. She kept looking around. At the shelf I'd built. At the plant. At the film list. At the hiking boots. You joined a hiking group, she said. Yeah. And woodworking? Yeah. The film course thing on the fridge. Community college, I said. Tuesday nights. She was quiet for a moment. You always talked about doing those things, she said. I know. When we were together, you'd mention them sometimes and I'd. She stopped. You'd what? She shook her head slightly. I'd redirect, without really meaning to. I'd make other plans, or I'd be vague about the timing, and eventually the idea would just dissolve. I said nothing. I didn't realize I was doing it, she said. Or maybe I did, and I told myself it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a big deal in isolation, I said. Everything is small in isolation. She looked at me. I've been seeing a therapist, she said. Since you left. Good, I said. And I meant it. She's helped me understand some things about why I behave the way I do. Why I needed the situation with Oliver. Why I said what I said to you that night. I don't need you to explain it, I said. I understood it. What do you mean you understood it? I mean I understand that you stopped wanting what we had, I said. Maybe before you even knew it consciously. And that the Oliver situation was part of that. And that giving me an ultimatum was easier than saying honestly that you wanted out. Her eyes went slightly wide. That sounds, she paused. That's not. I'm not saying it as an accusation, I said. I'm saying it because I think it's the truth, and I think part of you knows it's the truth. She was quiet for a long moment. I didn't want you to leave, she said eventually. I know. I wanted you to fight for me. Or at least argue. Push back. Something. I know, I said again. Why didn't you? I looked at her. Because fighting for someone who's already made a decision doesn't change their decision, I said. It just delays the end and damages both people. I've watched enough of those fights to know I didn't want one. So you just walked out. You told me to. I know I did. She exhaled. I know. She looked down at her coffee. Do you hate me? She asked quietly. No. I think you should. I don't do things to satisfy other people's expectations of how I should feel, I said. I don't hate you. I think we were wrong for each other in ways that I ignored for too long because I was afraid of the alternative. And now you're not afraid of it. No. She looked around the apartment again. At the shelf. At the plant. At the evidence of a life built in 5 weeks that somehow looked more like mine than the 3 years I'd spent shaping myself around hers. You're happy here, she said. It wasn't quite a question. I'm getting there, I said honestly. That fast. Not because of you, I said. Not because of leaving you specifically. Just because I'm spending time being who I actually am instead of who fit best in the space available. She absorbed that. I'm not over it, she said. I know that's strange to say since I'm the one who. It's not strange, I said, just because there was nothing left that required words. I want to tell you what the weeks that followed looked like. Because the story doesn't end with the conversation at my apartment. That was a turning point, not an ending. The ending, if you can call it that, was quieter. It was a Tuesday night film course discussion about a movie I'd loved for reasons I couldn't quite articulate until a woman in the class named Clara put into words exactly what I'd been feeling, and I looked across the table at her and thought, I want to know more people who think this precisely. We became friends. We're still friends. It was a Sunday hike where Sophie spotted an actual red fox on the trail and grabbed my arm and pointed, and her face was so purely lit up with it. And I thought about the last time I'd seen that kind of uncomplicated joy on someone I spent time with, and I couldn't pinpoint it. It was a Saturday afternoon when my brother flew in for a weekend visit, unannounced, which was exactly like him, and sat in my reading chair while I stood at the stove making dinner, and he looked around and said, This is you. This place is actually you. And I didn't say anything, but something settled in my chest when he said it, like a final knot coming loose. It was the morning I walked past the extended stay hotel where I'd spent my first week and felt nothing except a mild gratitude that it had existed when I needed it and that I didn't need it anymore. It was the night I sat at my desk with the shelf above me and the plant catching the lamplight, and I thought about the person who had stood in that kitchen doorway with a coffee mug and heard those 7 words and realized that person felt like someone I used to know. Not a worse version of me, not a damaged version, just an earlier one. One who hadn't yet made the decisions that led to this room, this light, this life that fit. There's a version of this story where I tell you about a dramatic reconciliation, where Qley comes back changed, and I welcome her home, and we build something better. I've read those stories. They're satisfying in a particular way. But that's not this story. This story is about what happens when you stop waiting for the version of events that would make everything make sense, and you choose the version that simply makes you whole. I think about what she said when she first walked into my apartment. You look like yourself. I've turned that over 100 times. Because it begs the question, who was I looking like before? And the answer is, I was looking like whoever Qley needed beside her to feel comfortable. Not someone she'd shaped deliberately. She hadn't manipulated me. She hadn't set out to diminish me. But there's a kind of relationship that operates through gravity, One person's center of mass is simply stronger, and the other orbits it, gradually, naturally, until one day they look up and can't quite see where they started. I'd been orbiting for 3 years, and the night she told me to leave, she accidentally gave me the most useful thing she could have given me. She gave me the exit I didn't know I needed. She gave me back my own center. The shelf is still on my wall. The plant is still alive. I've been surprised by this more than anyone. The hiking boots have been on 12 trails since September. The film course ended, and I signed up for the spring semester because it turns out I have a lot to say about movies when someone gives me the room to say it. Ben and I have dinner most weeks now. Sophie is coming to my brother's birthday trip in November. Clara is someone I think about sometimes in a way that's new and not yet anything, but might become something. And I'm in no hurry for it to become anything, because for the first time in years, I don't feel the anxious urgency to fill the space with something definitive. The space is fine. The space is actually good. I said at the beginning that something inside me went quiet when Qley told me to leave. I want to clarify what that quiet was. It wasn't defeat. It wasn't numbness. It was the quiet of a decision that had already been made at a level below language. The kind of quiet that comes when your body understands what your mind hasn't yet caught up with, that this is over, that it has been over for a while, that the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for her is to simply walk through the door she just opened. I nodded. I packed. I walked out. And I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because looking back has never once changed where the road goes. The road goes forward. It always goes forward. And sometimes the most radical thing you can do, the most honest, the most self-respecting, the most difficult thing, is simply to take it.